Okay, so we're going to start by taping our velour paper across the top to the board and across the bottom to hold the whole piece of paper in place. And then I'm going to just attach the photocopy, the tracing photocopy, over the top. So you can lift the paper up. Okay, this is ordinary printer paper, photocopy paper. So I've got a basic outline here, and you'll notice that I've split the lines into little lines. I've not done a continuous outline, and that's because we're going to be making an indent, and I'll eventually have to fill that indent in, and it's easier to disguise the indent as a piece of hair or fur than it is to try and fill in a continuous line. So I've just marked in the basics, the eyes, nose and the mouth, and then just put a rough idea of the shape of the markings on the panda. So I'm going to go round using a normal graphite pencil and press with a medium pressure over these little photocopy marks, and then lift the paper up just to make sure you can see your indents, because you don't want to be doing all of this work and then find out that you've not been pressing hard enough and then you can't see your indents. You don't have to be so specific with these indents. You don't have to go over the exact mark. It's just to get the basic shapes. So I'm just very quickly going round, following these little hairs, just to create the shape that I want. You can actually run your fingers over the top to feel where the indents appear. Keep lifting it up to make sure that I'm pressing hard enough. These indents are actually going in the direction of the fur. And that makes it easier to disguise. If for some reason we miss or forget to fill in the indent, it will more than likely look like a stroke of hair anyway, so it won't really matter. So you could do this with a biro or a pencil, anything really, because you don't actually go through and make a mark on the paper. And we can alter these shapes as we go along. They're not really completely accurate. But as I say, if I'm going along and I think the nostril's not the right shape, I can just change it. It's very forgiving, this paper is. There's marking in the tongue, and then this is just the teeth, which on my photocopy I've not marked the bottom, so I'm just going to draw a line across there so I know where the bottom of the teeth are. So I'll just lift that up and have a look to see it. Yep, that looks like it's all in. Done. Okay, so you can just fold your paper over the top of the board so that you can bring it back at any point if you feel a little bit bothered whether you've got all the indents or not. You can always bring it back. So now it's ready to work on the background. Okay, so I usually start with the background so that when I'm doing this fine hair detail on the panda, if I did that first and then did the background second, I'd probably end up going over a lot of detail that I've put in with the fur. So I always put the background in first. And I like to sort of generally start with an overall colour in the background and then add colours on top. So I'm going to use the flat of the pastel, so the long flat edge, flat to the paper, and use crisscross motions to slowly fill in the paper. This is a sort of a medium olivey green colour that I'm using. it doesn't really matter exactly what green you use, but I like to start with a sort of a mid-tone so that I could go darker or I could go lighter. And I'm not going to bother putting these leaves in the foreground, because leaves in themselves, you know, they're quite detailed, and I want it really to be about the panda. So I'm just going to do the whole background in a blurry style so that it doesn't detract from the panda. I'm taking this pastel right up to the indents and a little bit over so that I don't leave an edge around the panda. So medium sort of pressure, and I've covered over everywhere. I'm going to use the black next. And the reason why I'm going to use the black next is I mean, black's a little bit daunting to use anyway. And I really want to sort of push the black back eventually a little bit, but I want to establish some of the darker areas. So I'm just squinting at the reference photo, just having a look to see where the darker areas are. I'm not pressing on too hard for a start. I'm just trying to get the feel of how well the black goes on. It depends on what pastel you're using. I'm using Jackson's half sticks, and they are classed as a soft pastel, but they're probably a little bit harder in the range, which suits me because I like to build the layers up gradually, and I don't like to apply too much pastel in one go. So I've pressed on a little bit harder in some areas in the black, and then some areas I've pressed on a little bit lighter. It's all a little bit random, and I'm kind of doing little cross-hatching strokes, knowing that I could cover over this if I needed to. So that's some of the darker areas. I'm going to just start to put in some of the lighter green areas now. I'm using the light green in the Jackson's range. You don't have to follow the exact areas of green on the reference photo. As long as you put in a sort of a random area, it's just providing a background. It's not going to be about the background, it's going to be about the panda. So don't worry about it too much. So I've put some lighter green in. When I put the colour down, when I hit another colour, when I put the colour up to the next colour, I'm sort of lifting the pastel off and trying to blur it in so that I don't end up with blocks of colour everywhere. It's all very blended. You can even go over the black completely if you wanted to, if you thought it was too harsh. So let's go in with a bright yellow now and put in some bright yellow patches. This is one of my favourite colours, this yellow, really nice and bright. So you can go back at any point and put in, if I think this is all a little bit light over here, maybe I'll just go in and maybe even with some black, maybe just darken this corner a little bit. Even though there's no black in the reference photo, for me, I just feel like it just needed something in that corner. I'm pressing on quite hard with the yellow, and I'm actually keeping the yellow in the green areas, because if I start putting yellow over the black, it's going to go quite muddy. So I'm steering clear of the black areas. And if you sit it on the green, it's quite nice and bright. Okay, and now I'll finally go in with a little bit of white. I think this is just where the daylight's coming through. In this top area. Just has a little bit of variety. I'm going to put some over there as well. I quite like it. Yeah. So we've got a good background now, which we can alter or go back to at any point. Okay, I'm going to look at the colours that are involved generally on this panda. So it's whites and browns. And there's obviously reds and other colours in there, but just generally speaking, I don't really want to be going over some of the white area by accident with the brown. So I'm going to fill in the white areas first, so at least I know where they are. So just using the flat of the pastel, if you've got a small area, use the tip. So hold it flat and just tilt it up at the end. So you're using that flat edge. And I'm just marking out the area. I'm not bothering whether it looks like fur. I'm just marking a shape. Just. So it's quite rough, and I'm not pressing too hard because I want to be adding other colours in there as well. So this is generally white down there. This is as well. So now I'm taking it right over the indent, so I haven't got a gap in between the panda and the background now. So the white goes right up to the background. So we've got these bits on the cheeks. It wouldn't really matter too much what colour pastel paper you use, because we're doing a painting, which I usually class as filling in the whole of the paper with pastel. Because we're putting pastel all over, you wouldn't see too much difference between using sand or grey or dark grey. It probably gives a slightly warmer look. It depends what subject matter I was doing. If I was doing a penguin, I'd probably use the grey because it's a cooler colour. So I've just roughly marked in those white areas now. And I'll wipe my brown clean on a piece of tissue, and I'll start to fill in the rest of the bear. So I'm only going to work very lightly because I'm trying to mark out where the brown areas are. I don't need to press on too hard at this stage. And also pressing on lightly helps to reveal the indents so they can clearly see. I've gone over the whole of the eye. I don't mind because most of the eye is going to be so dark, it's going to cover this brown anyway. I can see what's going on there. Well, I might just use the edge. Can you see how it really does help to show those indents? Going right up to the edge. It's very loose. Doesn't matter if I go a little bit over the white, just as long as I can generally see where the white areas are. There we go. So we've blocked in some basic colours, and I can still see the outlines. So I know exactly where I'm going to go with the eyes. So the eyes are quite important. I think it's probably the most important aspect of the portrait. So I like to make sure that these have got quite a bit of detail in. So I'm going to use the pastel pencils for this because it's a small area. So I'm just going to start by filling in the indents that I've made. Just basic shapes for now, and then I'll just have a look, see what we've got left. Okay, so they're just the basic shapes of the indents. I'm just going to look at the photograph. We've got the pupil in the middle, which is purely black, so I'm going to colour that in purely black. there's a bit, the iris around the pupil, which is dark brown. Now I've only got one brown, so to make it dark, I'm going to sit it on some black. I could put brown in and put black on top, but I prefer to just do the whole thing in a tonal drawing first. So I'm going to shade the eye, the iris part of the eye, in black. And I'm going to do it as dark as I dare without losing that centre pupil. So it's quite dark. It's always a little bit off-putting when you're looking at it thinking it should be brown, but you're doing it black. But it's the tone that I'm trying to establish early on. So now I've got the black pupil and the iris. And now I want to look at the bit around the iris, which is black, dark black. And I know it's got that little white highlighting, but for now, I'm going to colour the outside in black. This bit at the bottom, there's a white highlight there. So I'm just going to extend this down a little bit more to make sure I've got enough room to add that highlight in. And there's a little tiny peak at the side there. And the same with this one. So dark over the top. And it goes a little bit further down than what I've got it. So I'm just going to extend that down a little bit more. Just put a little peaky bit in. So now we've got basically a tonal drawing of the eyes. And now we're going to add some colour in. So I'm going to add the brown now. This is for the iris. Colouring in. I'm using little circular motions, but you don't necessarily have to. But I think you can control it a little bit better because the eye is circular. Oh. Just reshaping that a bit. So now we've got the colour there. I'm going to add in a little bit of red using the red pencil. I'm not going to put the red all the way around. I'm just going to do it at the bottom, and I'm doing like a little smiley face in the brown, in the middle of the brown section. I'm not touching the black, I'm just keeping it in the brown. And I'm just going to slightly darken the top section ever so slightly with a black pencil. You often find this when you're doing portraits in eyes, because the eyes are obviously are sunken into the head a little bit. There will be a shadow that's caused over the top. So I'm just kind of creating an illusion of this shadow. And now we're ready to put some highlights in, which we'll do with the white pencil. So we'll just very lightly put in this little white line here, and I'm not bothering too much if it's not continuous, because I think it looks more effective if it's not. So just putting a hint of that white line under there. Need quite a sharp pencil for this. And then we'll put in the highlight. So there's lots of little highlights going on here. So I'll just put one over the top there. I'm looking just at the shapes. There's a little dot that side. So when you want to put a dot of highlight, put your pencil straight on and twizzle it round, and you get a nice clear dot. See how bright that is? I'll just put in a few dots at the top where I can see them and close together. There. So for the nose, we're going to use the pencil again because there are small areas we need to try and work into. So I'm going to put the pencil on the side, hold it quite close to the paper so you're using this edge, and I'm going to just shade in all over the nose. It just helps to lay down some colour and also reveal where the nostrils are. Okay. And then I'll look at the nose and see which bits are the darkest bits. So the nostrils are definitely the darkest. So I can use the indents, fill in these indents. If your pencil goes a little bit scratchy when you're filling in the indentation, just take off the pressure a little bit, tilt the pencil lower to the paper, and just sort of feather it round like that. Sometimes I think it flattens the fibres when you do the indents and it doesn't hold the pastel that well from the pencil. So the nostrils are black, so we can colour those in completely black, as dark as you can get them. Not by pressing on hard necessarily, but by going over the same area repeatedly to lay down more pastel. Okay. So if you squint at the nose, there's an area that's quite light. On the top part of the nose, it's quite light. But I'm going to colour in the nose a little bit darker to start with. Not as dark as the nostrils. But I'm going to colour in. I'm not bothering about that light bit at the minute. I'm just going to get the tone because although it's lighter than the bottom, it's still quite dark. And I'm just going to try and get rid of these indents as well. I'm literally just colouring it in. Making sure that I don't go any darker than the nostrils, otherwise you'll just lose where they are. So it's all quite dark. Yes. And then I'm going to try and mark in this centre line. You can't see it that well, but I'm just going to... It goes from the bottom to just above the nostrils. And then I'm looking at the nose. And the top part is lighter, but I think it's got a tinge of blue in it. So before I start putting in some highlights, I am going to use the Royal Deep Blue Pastel just to put a few flecks. I'm holding the pastel flat so that I'm just getting a soft mark. A few flecks of blue on the top.
Just
Can darken this down a little bit more because I think it could just go with a little bit darker. I almost want it as dark as the nostril, but I don't want to lose where the nostrils are. So it's just a case of building it up until you've reached that level. Can you see it goes into a little bit of a peak here.
just
And then I'm going to take the white pastel. And then I'm going to just do little tiny, very light circles. They're all kind of joined together. It's creating a sort of texture. I'm taking it right to the edge, so I've not got a black outline around the top of the nose. Really fine with your black if you need to. I've lost that little peak shape a bit. So there's some areas on this nose that are more bright white patches than others. So I'm just going to press a little bit harder in some areas where I can see the really white areas, really white patches or little circles like that. And then look at the other places where there's some highlights. You'll generally get a highlight under each nostril, and that's what will make the nostrils pop. So I'm going to keep that circular motion because I don't want it to be a line. I just want it to be a little smudge of colour. There. See, just that little line really brings the nostrils out. Might just add a few and just darken this down a little bit more as it gets towards the bottom of the nose. Flip the line back in. We're going to do the mouth next, and looking at the reference photo, there's quite a bit going on in this area, which I'm not going to be too bothered about, because sometimes I think less is more. And I'm just going to look at it tonally for a start off and try and break it down. So imagine that this was a black and white drawing. So I'm looking at which bits are dark and which bits are light and which bits are medium. So I know that the bits either side of the mouth here, I'm going to do it with the black pencil because it's a fiddly area. So I'll fill in the indents. Let's fill in the indents. Fill in the indents so I know where I'm working. Again, if it goes scratchy, just feather it along. So these are the shapes that I'm going to be working with. And all this area here is dark. So I'm literally going to colour it in dark. I'm not pressing on so I break the pastel. I'm just going over it several times to deepen pastel colour. Vanilla paper does create a small amount of dust, but not much. It's a relatively clean paper to use. You get dirty fingers, but that's about it. I mean, I'm obviously using black and I'm using it on an easel, so the pastel is falling down. But generally speaking, it's one of the cleanest papers to use because the pastel just sits in the fibres. It grips the pastel. So I can darken this with a pastel stick if I need to. I'm only going to do these outer areas because it's too small to fiddle around with the teeth. I've already gone over the tooth there. Doesn't matter because I can bring that back with the cream or the white. So the tongue, I'm going to do this as a tonal drawing. So I'm going to mark in the line, the centre line, which goes from the nose. It doesn't go right down to the end of the tongue. It's a little bit wider at the top, but not much. So it goes down about halfway. And then I'm just going to start to shade in the tongue using the side of the pencil. I'm making the back of the tongue darker. And then as it gets to the front of the tongue, I'm hardly going to put any pastel on. So I'm looking at the actual depth of this black here. It's the same as this, or even darker. So it's got to be really quite dark here. So it's this bit right at the back is very dark. And then it quickly fades off as it comes to the front of the tongue. So you've just got to get that blending going lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And obviously equal both sides. So you shouldn't really see a line here going into there. It's so graduated. I'm using cross-hatching a little bit to try and get rid of any vertical lines that are appearing just because I'm moving the pencil in the same direction. Just change it over now and again. So I've got a tonal drawing now of the tongue. I'm just going to re-establish that tooth bit. I've gone over it in black and that one. Okay. So now I've established which bits are darker and which bits are lighter. I can start to add some colour on now. I'm going to use the red pencil, the rusty red coloured pencil, to start to add in some colour. So I'm filling in this area that's not got a lot of black on it. I'm not pressing too hard because it's not bright red, it's more pink. But I'm taking the red right over the black and I'm pressing lighter and lighter and lighter until I reach the back of the tongue, and then I'm hardly pressing at all because I want to keep this back bit really quite dark. Going over the other way so I get rid of any lines. So that's looking more like a tongue. I'm going to need to add some, I'm going to add some pink. Although this looks like a bright pink, because it's sitting on the red, it's just going to turn the red a little bit more pink. So using the flat end, I'm just going to very lightly tint the tongue a little bit more pinky colour. And I think that's probably about right. You don't want to make it too... If you make it too pink, it just looks too false. So with the white pencil now, let's just do some highlights around the end of the tongue. Very lightly. Just highlighting the end part of the tongue. And I'm trying to use the flat at the side of the pencil so that I don't get any sharp marks. So it's almost like a U shape in the bottom of the tongue. And just look where the highlights are. There's a little bit more of a highlight on this little bit there. Okay, so for the teeth, just going to darken this down a little bit here around the tongue, because there is that dark bit that separates the tooth from the tongue. And I'm going to use the cream for the teeth, because when you look, they're not white, they're kind of a dirty cream, which is why I'm not so bothered that this has got black on it. In fact, I'm going to put a bit of black on there to start with, so it evens them up a little bit. Then I'll use the cream to mark out the teeth. I'm not pressing on really hard because otherwise it'll be too bright. A bit of cream. And then I'm just going to still use the cream, but I'm going to press on a little bit harder on the tip of each tooth, just to show that it comes to a point. And then I'm going to look at the this gum area at the side. And as I say, I think, you know, less is more when it comes to things like this. And I'm not going to sit and bother about every little undulation in the gum area. So I'm going to hold the pencil quite flat, and I'm going to just dither about where I think I can see some red. And it is literally just dithering about, and you can leave the viewer to decide what's actually going on. I'm just literally going to do it as if I was just doing a few wiggles for the bottom of the gum. I can't see anything really any further than that. Just make this look a little bit darker. And then there's just a couple of white vague marks where the lights caught the gum. And I think we should leave it at that. So let's start to get some deeper colours into the panda. So as an overall colour, I'm just going to start with the brown, holding the pastel flat and just pressing a little bit harder than I was on the brown areas. So just reinstating this. Doesn't have to be completely even, because there isn't. Twist the pastel around. To get these shapes established. So I'm not paying too much attention to the actual colour, I'm just colouring in the brown bits. Still see the indents, but that's fine because we'll hide those when we come to view the hair. Okay, so that's the brow. And then I'm just going to sort of squint at the reference photo and just see what colours I can see. It's obviously darker on the bottom half, but I want to just get some reds down first. Just turning the pastel around to find an edge that's working well. And I'm going to stop just under the eyes. I'm just going over this brown, making it a little bit more red. It's eventually going to have some black on it. So just under the eyes and maybe just going up the nose a little bit. And then the top half is more of an orangey yellowy colour. I've already got brown on there. I think if we add some of this yellow, although it looks really light, because it's sitting on the brown, not light, it looks bright, it looks a bright yellow, but because it's sitting on the brown, it's just going to tinge the brown to make it more yellowy, a little bit more golden. So I'm adding yellow on top of the brown. Adds a little bit of interest. And then I'm going to go back and use the red just to put in some of these darker areas on the forehead. They sort of follow the curve of the head, so it's a little bit like a tonal drawing. I'm just putting some of the darker bits in. So as I say, it follows. I'm using the long flat edge of the pastel. It's following. It's not a continuous curve. I'm breaking it up. Can you see? It just helps to give the illusion that the head is rounded. I'm going to use the white just to lighten some of these areas up. The same way as I've looked at where the darker patches are, I'm going to look to see where the lighter patches are. So along the top. I'm moving it up and down. It's almost like creating, I feel as though I'm creating a little bit of hair, but it's very, very soft. I'm not creating each individual hair. I'm creating where the hair is forming brighter areas. I'm just marking that extra bit of light there, which is part of the eyebrows. Got another little bit there. Okay, we're going to use the black now to just create the depths, especially in the bottom half of the panda. And we'll start off with some black in the ear. I'm not bothering about the fur because that fur is going to sit on the top. So I'm just using the pastel flat and creating the shape, roughly the shape. So doing a few wiggles to break up the evenness. There's a little bit of darker inner ear there. This is dark, so I'm going to use that. I'll add colour on top of that eventually. And now I'll start to darken around the bottom part. So this is really quite dark. So I'm going to press on harder at the bottom, and then as it moves towards the outside, can you see it starts to get more red and lighter? So I'm only pressing on harder where the dense black areas are, but each movement is blending the colour into the next colour, so that there's no beginning or end to where the colours change. So if this is really dark, in fact that goes a little bit higher to about there. There's that bit at the side of the mouth that goes straight into this dark area at the side of the cheek. So that goes up there. Trying to create this pouching area here where it goes round there. So it's dark all under there. Oh. Now up here. And then again, it joins onto the edge of this mouth before it starts going around. You see, I've got those pouches going on there. And then I'll just darken it round here a little bit. So fade it off as I more or less get halfway up the panda. So I'm going to use the black again now just to create some of the darker areas on the nose. This is a white area, but it has got some darker patches. So very lightly, I'm just kind of tapping the pastel, but I'm keeping it flat. I'm not using the point, otherwise I'll end up with lots of little dots. So just tapping that area there. It's dark under the nose. And along the bottom there. And then there's actually some whisker holes here, which I'm not bothering about the holes. I'm just looking at the kind of the lines that they are creating. And there's a few dots around there. I'm just softening some of these lines, ready for when I get use the white.
Each.
So very lightly, if you look, the eyes look a little bit like buttons because they just stand out a little bit too much. So I'm just going to very lightly soften around the edge and soften them into the fur. I've blended everywhere so that it's not a shape. I've not just done a circle around the eyes, I'm blending out.
Okay.
Now it's ready for the white. Okay, so I'm going to use the cream pastel pencil to create the fur on the brown, and then I'll use the white pastel pencil to create the fur on the whiter areas. So if I start with the cream areas, there's two ways you could do this. You could sit and do each individual hair stroke, so like this. Not going completely straight up, but just going slightly curved, slightly crossing over, but all in the direction of the fur. Or the quick way to create fur texture is to hold the pastel pencil at the end, hold it low down to the paper, and make a zigzag shape like this. Small zigzags, slowly filling the paper. Try not to take the pencil off the paper because you might end up with rows that will look like writing eventually from a distance. So I'm moving the pencil in the direction of the fur. You can hold the pencil down that way, so holding the pencil on top, or you can hold the pencil underneath and pull it round. It might be easier depending on the angle you're working at. So I'm going to do it like this because it's going to be quicker. So I'll quickly show you. This takes a little bit of practice, but start off slowly and then you can work your way up to a quicker speed. So basically, if I just show you quickly with a black pencil, so you're sort of doing this shape, and then when you want to move, you move the pencil into another area and do it down. Can you see? I'm not taking the pencil off, but I'm going wherever I want to go by just moving it in the direction, but I'm keeping it in the direction of the hair. So I'm not sort of going over there and then going. It's all up and down. So if I wanted to get from there to there, I would have to work my way over like that. So this is, I'm pressing on relatively hard because I'm actually indenting the paper as I go along. And I'm keeping the pencil in line with the fur. So I'm not going like that because I'm going to create a thick mark when I do that. Can you see that thick blended mark? I want a sharp point. So I'm going to work right the way up to the indents and over the indents, and now they've been disguised already. So I'm going over everything, all the brown area, and I've gone over all my marks, but I can still see the colours underneath. I might re-establish some a bit later on, but for now, I'm just going round. Remember to try and twizzle your pencil round as you go along, which will help to sharpen it. I mean, this does take a little bit of time, but not half as long as it would if you did every individual hair. But even if you wanted to create just a texture and then do individual hairs on top, you've got a good base to start with. I do a little bit and then I move to a completely different area. Just get a bit bored. So, and it stops your hand from aching if you've got it in one position all the time. This sort of technique is great for any short-haired animal, especially hares which have got wiry sort of fur. I'm just going to swap to the white and put some white, blending it in. Can you see it's the cream? I'm keeping the pencil in the direction that I'm pushing or pulling. These are slightly longer, so it means I can do longer zigzags. Try and make sure that you keep it as a zigzag, because if you start to get lazy and end up doing a kind of a U or an N shape, it'll look like curly hair, which is all right if you're doing a sheep. I mean, when you're doing sort of smaller areas like this, you might find it easier to do individual hairs, but this is just a small area. I might refine this by doing individual hairs, but for now I'll just do this method. You can see how I've just brought a little bit of black into that by mistake because I didn't wipe the pencil. These are longer hairs. My indents have been hidden because they just look like a stroke, like a little hair now. I might just reinstate this bit because I've lost that and that bit. So, I mean, I'm just going to work quite roughly on the outer parts of the panda because it's the center bit that's the focal point. And it's this bit that you're going to be drawn into. So the bits on the outside, I'll probably do with a pastel stick. So, I mean, this is tricky because it goes round, so you're constantly moving your arm to keep the direction of the fur in the right place. So this is my focal point. So I'm going to go in fact I might go in with the red pencil. And I'm doing a similar sort of thing, but I'm not, you'll notice I'm not going so close together because I've already got the texture there. So I'm doing this quite spread out. I'm not putting in so many. I don't need so many. You could press on in some areas. Can you see how it's just breaking the fur up because I'm pressing on slightly harder in some areas. I'll just put a little bit there to try and break these indents a bit. Anything that's obvious, you can just colour in. I don't need to go into this black bit because it's so dark anyway. So we've got just adding a couple of brown ones in, but even less. So I've got the hair detailing now. Okay, so just need to do a little bit more detail on the ears. We've got no hairs going into the ears, so I am going to do these individually because it's not going to take me long. I'm holding the pencil sort of halfway along and moving the pencil in the direction of the hair. And it's the same way as we'll be doing the whiskers. So a few hairs in there, a few hairs on this side. And then I'm just going to use the white to really bring out some of the white areas because they're a little bit weak and they're a little bit muddy where I've caught the black. So we'll start to, I'm using the pastel end, but I'm using the flat of the pastel and just bringing out some of the really white areas. So if you look around the edge, it's really quite white around there. I'm kind of moving it as if I was doing little hairs, but they're all kind of joined together. Let's just deepen down the centre of the eyebrows. And then a few strands of lighter white. You can get a brighter white with this pastel stick than you can with the pencils. Keep the hair direction. I'm going to use a little bit of brown in there. You could use maybe a bit of red. You could use purples and all sorts really in there if you wanted to experiment with colours. And then just to establish this bit on the nose, going back in with this white makes all the difference. And you can use it as a block. You don't have to make it look like hair because you've already got the hair in there. I'm putting in just areas of concentrated white. It makes makes the panda look more fluffy. I was going to say like a bear. Okay, and finally we'll just put in the whiskers. So just making sure you've got a clean white. Starting from this area, hold the pencil in the direction that you're going to mark the whisker and follow the direction round. So if I'm going to do the whisker down there, I'm not going to hold it and do that, and I'm going to hold it and do that. I'm going to keep the pencil in the direction. So be brave and start as you mean to go on and just curve it around. You don't need to do it quickly. You just got to be positive with the move. You're going to have to wipe it after every time because it's going into this black and you'll take black into your white again. So be mindful about where the whiskers go. They go right out here. So start here. Cross them over. Go right round there. just got some short whiskers here. It's very black and white, this, so you do have to keep wiping your pencil, otherwise you'll end up with dirty black bits on the white.
Yes.
So I am pulling the pastel in the direction now. I could do with sharpening my pencil. Picture sharper white. We've got a sharper white there. So cross some of the whiskers over each other, bring them right out. There's a few black ones in the same way. You're not pressing as hard with the black. And then there's some, you can see them in the eyebrows. Finished.